Welcome to SUPERVIVE, a hero battle royale that will become your next 1000-hour game. It's got a ton of hunters to choose from, an awesome physics engine, crazy combat, and a lot of deep mechanics to learn. But you're obviously here as a beginner, so let's explore all the basic things you need to know about SUPERVIVE to survive the upcoming Steam Next Fest week-long 24/7 playtest. Before we get into it though, you have to remember that games like this are ridiculously in-depth. You oftentimes can't explain one thing without explaining another, so I tried to piece together a system where I can teach you from the ground up without it being too confusing. This guide is targeted at the casual audience, but I won't sacrifice accuracy to coddle them at all. If you don't understand things, feel free to ask questions in the comments, and I'll also leave info screens here and there for you to pause and read through. I'll try to keep it relatively simple, fun, and understandable. Enjoy the guide. Let's start with some basic controls and UI. You move in this game with WASD keys, or if you're freaky with it, the arrow keys. I do not recommend doing so. Every key corresponds to a cardinal direction, and you can combine them to create diagonal movement. Now obviously my movement is independent of where I'm facing with a couple of exceptions, but the reason why is because my hunter will always face where my mouse is. Where you are facing generally determines where you can see as well as where you are aiming. Having good mouse precision is key in this game. That's why I recommend lowering your DPI. Your mouse also controls where your camera centers, and there are a ton of complicated settings that more advanced players can tinker with, but this is all you need to know for now. Also, do not use locked camera. Next, we have a couple common extra buy-ins like spacebar for jumping, as well as gliding, which I'll go into later when it's more relevant. Left control for sneaking, which narrows your cone of vision but also extends it so you can spot things further out, slows you down, but also removes your footstep sounds. Finally, we have the interact button, E, which is used to interact with anything interactable obviously, which you'll learn what those things are throughout this video, so it's good to remember this button. Now we have the exciting buttons, your abilities. Now every hunter will have different abilities of course, but the default keys all have a general classification. For example, every hunter's basic attack is bound to the left mouse button. It's the most accessible, easy to spam, and obvious key in your kit, so make sure you get used to it. Next we have your right click, which I call the bread and butter skill, typically a lower cooldown ability that can be spammed. Then we have the left shift, which will always be your mobility button, such as a dash. No matter what hunter you play, this button is important to remember, understand, and utilize often. It is extremely important to understand how to aim your dash. There are 3 settings that I'll show on screen now that determine where your dash goes. The default setting is, in my opinion, the best because it will try to go towards whatever direction you are inputting, but will prioritize your cursor if you input towards it. For example, here I'm inputting away from my cursor so it goes towards my WASD inputs, but in this example, my WASD inputs are close enough to the cursor so my dash prioritizes the cursor direction. The other 2 suck. Trust me, don't use them. Next we have the Q key, which I'll call the utility spell. It's got the biggest differences from hunter to hunter, but they all typically involve some sort of utility. Finally, we have your ultimate ability on the R key. It's your powerful, game-changing move that has a really long cooldown and can only be unlocked at level 5. Speaking of which, let's get into the EXP system, which we can't do without talking about camps first. Camps are neutral monsters that can be killed for a ton of benefits, one of which, of course, is experience points, which you need in order to increase your level. You start every game at level 1 with 1 ability point, which can be used to unlock any of your basic abilities, and gain an ability point every time you increase your level. The XP requirement to level up also goes up with each level. Quick, study this info sheet for important details while I move on. One key component about the level system in this game is the level cap, which is the most annoying thing on earth to explain, so I'm going to make it as simple as possible for you, okay? You ready? You cannot level up past the level of the thing that you are killing. This means that if you are the same level as the camp you are killing, it won't give you any experience. If you're below it, you're totally fine. Don't worry though, because camps will scale up according to SUPERVIVE's day and night cycle. This is basically a pacing mechanic for players that love to farm up and do nothing, because if you want to get higher levels, you have to play towards a single exception in this game, which is killing players. Yes, killing players gives EXP and ignores any soft caps. The thing is, even if you can't gain EXP, you can still gain things from killing camps through the equipment system. Equipment is the other key way to scale your hunter outside of abilities and levels. At the start of the game, you choose between 3 options: 2 damage equipments, damage and tank equipment, or 2 tank equipments. These will eventually be upgraded into unique equipments with names. Here's a list of equipments in the game. The color denotes their power level, following the classic rarity system that every game uses. Once an equipment reaches blue, you can choose one of the 3 paths that give different stats and effects that I won't even touch on. You can read them in game because it's almost like trying to explain every single item in League of Legends to a new player. It's a waste of time and you won't remember anyway. Default recommendations, like other games, are serviceable, but you can try things by yourself. Anyways, in order to level up your equipment, you need to farm a set amount of scraps from camps and it'll automatically work towards upgrading your equipment. You can also kill a player, get what's called a power shard, and then click this button to level up equipment manually. So pretty much killing things is always good in this game. Speaking of which, here's how to kill camps properly. Now there are many different kinds of camps, but generally kill the small ones first. The green guy is the healer, make sure he dies right away, and the big guys will always have a special move that forms a pink circle that looks like this that you need to use a damaging ability on in order to interrupt, stagger, and massively damage a camp so you can clear it faster. It also resets the ability that you use to hit it with, so don't worry about wasting your shit. You can also just do this if you play Void like me. Moving on, we have gold. Gold can be gained through killing camps, breaking certain things in the environment, and of course, killing players and looting them. Gold has a ton of uses. That's it. It has a ton of uses. There are way too many, so I'll mention them as they come up in other topics. Like this one, the item shop, which is the main place to use your gold. You can buy all kinds of shit here. Most of them are consumables, speaking of which are bound to 1 through 4. It can be things such as healing potions to heal, jump pads to jump, scan grenades to scan areas, and also the storm grenade to, well... You can also buy specific equipments that you'd like instead of doing the whole scrap thing, exotic powers sometimes, and one of the most important things in the game, armor. Armor reduces the amount of damage you take. The higher tier your armor, the more it will reduce. Armor has durability and loses it as you get hit. This is the status of your armor, both its durability left as well as tier. Repair armor at anvils, forges, and also armor repair pickups from killing players. There might be a bit of a pattern emerging here. Where do you get good armor though? Well, there are a ton of different ways to come across good armor, such as buying it from shops like I mentioned before, supply drops later in the game, as well as killing players and looting them of course, but one of the main systems in SUPERVIVE to get armor is the vault mechanic. Vaults are structures that can contain armor, gold, as well as these things called powers. Any vault with an armor icon on it is guaranteed to have armor there, but every vault will have powers at the minimum. In order to crack the vault, you have to play the lockpicking minigame. It's easier to show you what that looks like than to describe it. Basically, you press a button when this little tab is inside the green zone. The light green zone does more damage to the vault and also activates these pillars. If the pillar is killed, hopefully by a helpful teammate, it does additional damage to the vault and also makes the next sequence easier by expanding the green zone and making it all light green. If you miss, first of all you suck, but you'll be greeted by an alarm and also these small circle bomb things that will interrupt your next attempt as well, so make sure to either clear them yourself or get a friend to kill/tank them for you. You could also just skill issue it and not miss 7 times in a row to automatically crack the vault and also get an additional piece of loot, generally a higher tier power.
Vault cracked.
Now let's talk about some key points on the map that you'll need to be able to identify, understand, and incorporate into your gameplay. Let's pull up the map with the tab key by default and look at some of this shit. Alright, you already know about camps, item shops, and vaults. Let's take a look at some base camps. These can be captured by standing on them and have a ton of different benefits to the team that occupies it. Number 1, it replenishes your health and mana if you stand on it. Number 2, it gives you perma-vision of the area around it and also notifies you on the map if enemies start walking onto it. Number 3, you can recall to it at any point by pressing the default bind B. Finally, you can pack up your base camp for 5,000 gold and turn it into a consumable that you can then drop somewhere else later. This can be repeated infinitely. Do not stand underneath the base camp as it's dropping. Additionally, there are 2 components to the base camps that can be used regardless of ownership. The cooking range, which is used to cook your vibe bean consumables, which make them heal more health and mana, as well as the anvil, which is used to repair armor like I mentioned before at a cost with gold that I mentioned before. Higher rarity armors cost more. I'm low-key gonna speed through these other ones because they're not as important. This is a forge. You stand in the middle of one to slowly repair your armor at no cost, but it makes a shit ton of noise so your opponents will know you're doing it. This icon is a UAV beacon. Once triggered, you'll get information on where every other player/team is unless they're untrackable by any means. It has a cooldown and also alerts every other team that you've activated it. Now this green icon is something that you have to be able to identify at a quick glance. This is an important one. It is a resurrection beacon. If at any point one of your members is either dead or a wisp, it can be activated by standing within its ring. Once activated, it will slowly tick until the circle is fully completed and said members will resurrect at the beacon's location. If even a single opponent steps on it while you're on it, it will stop ticking until they are removed. This is why defending beacons properly is important. Once your team has used the beacon, it won't be usable again. This is shown with the red icon. Beacons can also start in a broken state, which requires you to spend 2500 gold to repair them, and they are represented with a grayed out icon. There are some infinite use unique beacons, such as the Heart, which is a huge orb located in the middle of the map, and a couple others. The Heart, though, in particular is funny because it functions as a res beacon but cannot be interrupted by opponents stepping into the range. Unfortunately, though, if you touch it directly or somehow get pushed into it, you die. You can also teleport the Heart onto people's faces to kill them. Funny as fuck.
Whoa! Let's go!
So earlier I mentioned the thing about your team being either dead or a wisp, and here's what that means. When you lose all your HP in SUPERVIVE, you enter a down but not out state called the Wisp. You can still crawl around a little bit, but you'll slowly burn out unless a teammate stands on you. Once they do, this green bar will slowly fill up, your health will stop burning, and eventually resurrect you. If they somehow manage to step off you, the res bar will slowly deplete, but they can pick it back up. It is important to continue kiting away to safety while they're stepping on you. If an opponent manages to step on you, your health bar will rapidly deplete and you'll eventually die. The other case is if both an opponent and a teammate are stepping on you. In this case, the opponent takes precedence and you will not continue to res while also rapidly losing health. It is important as the attacker to prevent your opponents from resing by stepping on their wisp if you can. There are also various ways to resurrect a wisp through powers, abilities, and consumables. If you manage to fully die by getting knocked into Wisp and then also dying as a Wisp, you will become a Deathbox. Your opponents can now loot your armor, powers, and gain additional benefits from this Deathbox. Your Deathbox will appear below where you died unless you died over non-solid ground like the Abyss, in which case it will appear at either your killer's location or the last solid ground you touched. You can be manually resurrected from this box by a teammate, but keep in mind that this makes a ridiculous amount of sound and can be heard through fog. You can also just res beacon. Alright, let's change gears and talk about mechanics now. This is the fun stuff, alright? In SUPERVIVE, there's a functional Z-axis that has movement, combat, and movement in combat implications. I'm going to try to explain the physics engine in this game as best as possible, but keep in mind that I didn't take any science past 10th grade, so I don't really know physics or anything like that. Sometimes when I jump, I don't fall back down. I hope that joke lands. But it's simply, anything that would normally happen in real life will probably happen in this game. For example, if you're dashing in one direction and someone pushes you from the side, you will retain a bit of your original momentum. Friction and air resistance exist in this game, so the name of the game is inertia. Now the fun part is, unlike in real life, you can break these rules with various combinations, abilities, and powers.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Speaking of which, I've mentioned powers a ton, but I've intentionally left until now to explain because I didn't want to overwhelm you, but here it is really quickly. Powers are 2 additional active or passive abilities that you can pick up throughout the game. They are default bound to F and G, and you have to remember that these are not like your base abilities. They are additional ones that tend to have longer cooldowns. See, if I told you about these 2 buttons at the start, you might have ended up thinking this game had like 7 abilities and gotten scared, but no, it's generally going to be shit like dropping health packs, pushing people away every now and then, or even make like a tree and stay, I guess. I mean, are they really going to suspect a tree? Also, just as a refresher, your primary source of powers are vaults. Silly mechanics aside, having combat in 3 dimensions means that sometimes you'll miss abilities because your opponent was way too high up or way too far down. Don't worry, people can't just jump over your shit with spacebar or crouch underneath with control, but there are ways they can avoid you, like falling towards the abyss, which kills you by the way, or using a jump pad to jump over you. However, anytime someone is too high or too low, you will see this red circle called the soul anchor appear. This is their actual hitbox, which means as long as you put your cursor on this thing, your ability will fire towards where they actually are. It makes it a lot easier. Unlike some other games. Now before we go on, we have to talk about gliding. At any point, if you don't have your feet on solid ground and you hit the bind for glide, default is also space, but I highly recommend separating your jump and glide keys, you will pull out your glider. Understanding glider mechanics is the key to not having a terrible time in SUPERVIVE. This is because if you get hit while gliding by anything that does damage, it will instantly send you to the ground, stunning you. If you are over the abyss, you will instantly die. This is called a spike. Also, just to formally introduce the Abyss to you, it's generally anywhere that doesn't have solid ground. I mean, that should be pretty obvious. Absolutely do not hit spacebar in combat out of habit. I know it's cool and you want to fly your target, but there's basically no reason to do so outside of advanced tactics because they will simply hit you. I don't have footage of this because I don't do this. If you need to glide to not fall and die over the Abyss, then do this. Bars. Fall as close to the bottom as possible and essentially feather your glider by tapping and releasing the button. This is because when you're gliding, you will rapidly gain Z-axis, so even a tap can save you from death. This also means that you're minimizing the window of time that your opponent has to spike you because your glider isn't out. You can also do this to just gain more distance in the Abyss. Compare holding a glider out versus disciplined gliding. Don't panic and do this one either. Definitely don't do this. Keep in mind some hunters can edge guard you forever. This is why it's awesome that SUPERVIVE also has a mantling mechanic. If you touch the side of a climbable platform, your hunter will do a little wall jump towards the surface. Mantling has a 1-second cooldown, which is basically an infinite loop if you need to use it. Just really don't hit spacebar, dude. You do not want to spike yourself. Too many noobs will play this upcoming playtest, spike themselves, and then try to cope by saying the game is bad. No, you are bad. Skill issue. Outside of combat, gliding is useful for going between places separated by abyss, quick movement in tandem with abilities, as well as going through glider ring highways. These things speed you up and replenish your glider fuel, which is this icon here. Once you run out of glider fuel, it will deactivate and does not start recharging until you touch solid ground. There are a ton of small details I'll leave to the info screen, but you can get away with knowing just the things I mentioned here. Alright, let's move on to some of the macro game concepts and mechanics that you'll naturally encounter throughout the game, but let's do it in a fun way. So far I've been teaching you topic to topic, but I'm going to go through an example game where I simulate what a normal game with SUPERVIVE could look like so I can teach the rest of it in their context. Let's start with loading into the game. I choose my hunter, my default equipment is already what I want it to be, so I don't touch it, and the storm shift, which is basically like a modifier in the game, happens to be nothing in this game, so I don't worry about it. It could be a ton of different things, but as a new player, definitely don't worry about this. Just know that every game with SUPERVIVE could be different from the very start. Once I load in, the game reminds me about the type of storm shift and the dropping paradigm. In this case, it's the simplest direct plane, which means that the spawning plane flies a direct path across the map, and because I'm the drop leader, I can left click anywhere within its circle to select as my team's drop location. I spot this T3 armor vault, so I decide to drop onto a camp nearby, and here I go. In the middle of this dropping animation, I'm allowed to briefly steer the drop pod with WASD. My teammates could break off from the main drop pod at this point if they'd like to with WASD as well, or they can just let me drive them to where I want. This reticle shows where I'll actually land, which is basically on top of the camp. I proceed to fight it, making sure to prioritize the small camps and the healer, while also using my dash ability to stagger the big creep when it uses its super move. I level up my right click in the middle of the camp because killing the small ones got me to level 2, granting me an additional point. I do this by pressing the button because it has no levels in it. If I wanted to upgrade it further, I would hold Alt and then press the bind associated with the ability I want to level up. In this case, I don't want to do that because I want all 3 of my basic abilities before putting points into any specific one. Additionally, after collecting enough scraps, I'm able to upgrade my basic equipment into a tech blade to start, granting me cooldown reduction. This basically just lets me use abilities more often. Here I check the map and notice that the first zone denoted by this big green circle is hovering towards the left side of the map. I'm well within its bounds, so I don't have to move right now, and even if I weren't, it takes quite a while for the first zone to close in. Don't worry about this. I now look to crack open this vault solo like a beast. Easy, I get an additional power because of this, but first I pick up blue armor, which is a huge upgrade from my basic gray armor. Then I look to pick up this higher tier power, Guardian Angel, which is a passive power that resurrects teammates. I also pick up Iron Fist because it's funny, you don't have to remember these things. Nice, now let's move to another camp to get day 1 soft cap of level 4. I use my utility spell in conjunction with my glider to move quickly to this camp, and once I've killed it, I can now upgrade my second basic equipment to a Vampiric Blade, granting me Omni Vamp, which heals me for a percentage of the damage that I do. Now I want to move towards a base camp, so after some fast movement tech, I arrive at this base camp, which I will now capture and also cook the food that I got from killing camps earlier. This is important. So now at this point, I've got a place to recall to, 2 basic items, level 4, some good armor, 2 powers, and I'm ready to fight. But because this is a custom game, I have no one to fight. So you know what, let's head over to the edge of the storm using a glider ring highway. I'm making sure to practice some good glider mechanics on the way as well. Gliding maintains inertia, so as I'm about to contact the next ring, I make sure to reactivate my glider to retain a lot of the extra speed that I get from touching it. Now that I'm at the edge of the storm, I can see it encroaching on the map and it'll come in pretty soon. I also notice a boss spawning. Yes, these exist in SUPERVIVE as well, and they give great loot. So, after bathing in the storm for a little bit, which barely does anything early on, I make my way over to the boss. Now, the boss looks different and certainly has different attacks, but the general principle of hitting the pink circle applies here. Once I kill it, I get a mythic equipment to replace my gray vampiric blade. I select it by interacting with the item on the ground and hovering my mouse over the one I wanted to replace, then releasing the button. At this point, the zone is closed in a ton, and the next circle looks to be cutting off another important boss in this game, except this one's called a soul. There will always be 2 souls in the end game, chosen from a bigger pool. These give a permanent team-wide buff that can only be taken if another team wipes yours and loots it off you. This one happens to be Shrapnel Soul, which makes you do more damage to armor. And because the zone will close in soon, I choose to go for it right away. As I arrive at its location, you'll immediately notice that this thing looks a lot different than others. You see, souls have different phases. Phase 1 requires you to kill these 4 crystal things floating around it. Very easy. Once you do that, it triggers phase 2 and fires off 3 independent crystals very far from the original location, and typically you'll have teammates to split up and look for clues, but I go ahead and kill them all myself and then head back to the main body to get ready for phase 3. This phase has a charged 360 beam move that you can stagger, and a 4-way beam shot. I'm pretty good at this phase, so I instantly stagger it, so it might be hard to tell that it has like an actual beam thing, but it does, okay. And hitting it from the back does more damage, but I'm only one guy, so it's hard to get an angle. A couple more repetitions, and I finally kill it, triggering the final phase indicated by this big purple circle. Once it collapses into a singularity, you have to interact with the soul itself to capture it. Opponents can swoop in at this time and steal it from you, so make sure to defend it. Yes, you can essentially Baron steal in this game. It is very funny to do so, because it takes a bit of work to kill the soul boss, and you can just kind of go in and take it from them, so, you know, and like, keep that in mind. Once I claim the soul, a mini storm forms at its location that expands outward. Just don't be there, just leave. While I'm leaving, I notice a supply drop, a red one at that, which means it's a mythic. I go to stand on it to capture it, and it gives me, ironically, the exotic version of my Guardian Angel power. Pretty insane if I got in a real game, by the way. By this time, the zone has closed in quite a bit, and I notice the soul is right next to the base camp that I captured way back, so I go ahead and recall, making sure to check it by pressing the interact key during my recall, so I can, you know, make sure the coast is clear. Now I will proceed to not do the soul because I just showed you how to do one, and instead I'll hover over this crown looking thing. This is the final thing I'll show you, called Most Wanted. It is one of the coolest comeback mechanics in any game you will play. Basically, if any of your teammates are dead, you can pick it up to start a timer. Once this timer finishes, any of your dead teammates will spawn on you and you get an EXP bonus, letting you break the level cap, blah blah blah. If you happen to kill anyone with Most Wanted, it will also lower the timer by a certain amount. The catch is, everyone will be able to see you on the map as a red crown that updates every couple of seconds. Hopefully this practical endgame example serves as the perfect finish to a long tutorial. Nah, fuck. I can't one-tap anyone through this F. I have to get this F.
Grab armor.
You have so much mana, you just actually won't run out, huh?
Let's go, let's go.
Nice.
Care.
He's in all,
I got two.
He's low.
Yes. Nice. Yes. Okay. I'm getting blocked. I'll jump at you. Go. Go stop that. Yes.
Nice job.
Dude. That's too fun. It's too fucking. All I will say is this game isn't a game you pick up just by watching my video. You gotta get your hands on it as it goes live today and just try. Hopefully I've prepared you enough to at least understand some of the things as you come by them in game. And if there's absolutely nothing else you learn from this video, I hope at the very least, do not hit spacebar. Seriously, today, do not get spiked. Good luck. Oh, and don't run in front of trains.
I got him on the train. Just.
I'll cover a ton more advanced and niche concepts in future videos, but for now, get the fuck in there, play some SUPERVIVE. Thanks for watching. I truly hope this guide helped you. Big shout out to Aiden BY, Weedle, Paz, Lunatherius, and all the Theorycraft devs for your help in filming or opinions and blah blah blah. Alright, go, enjoy.